24 Hours in Police Custody is one of my favourite TV shows ever. I've talked about it several times on this channel, and I have to say, Cold to the Touch is easily one of the most emotional. I think within the first 2 minutes I was welling up. Actually, I didn't cry throughout it, and I think that's more because I was shocked. I will talk about the case itself, of course. I have a lot of thoughts, but I will try and keep this as concise as possible. But if you do have thoughts of your own or want to share your opinions, I strongly encourage you to do so. But just from a technical perspective, from a documentary making perspective, I thought this was very well presented. This is a very sensitive topic about the death, potential murder of an 11-week-old baby called Teddie. And he's gorgeous, absolutely beautiful little baby. And at the start of the episode, there's a 999 call. The father is saying that the baby's not breathing, and it transpires quite quickly that the baby has several injuries. And it's touch and go, mostly not showing any signs of survival. It's pretty emotional, the scenes in the hospital. We do get a lot of body cam footage from this. Body cams are fantastic. As soon as body cams began to be used by the police force, by paramedics, true crime documentaries have become insanely amazing. I know that's not their primary purpose, but I am discussing a true crime show, so I kind of have to mention that we do get a lot of body cam footage. There's no reconstruction here. 24 Hours never does reconstructions. Everything that we are being told is being backed up by visuals. And as the two episodes progress, I actually watched it in one sitting. If you go on to all four, you can watch them all the way through. And obviously, as the investigation progresses, it looks into the father and the mother and the roles they played or potentially played in the death of this 11-week baby. Now, I will say now this is worth watching if you like this kind of true crime documentary. And I think you should watch it. And there will be spoilers from now, because everything I want to talk about is going to deliver the verdict. I'm going to say my thoughts on some things I don't actually agree with that were mentioned in the documentary. But I will say it's an absolute honour and a privilege being able to watch the professionals at work doing their best to hopefully eventually bring justice for baby Teddie. And it's just so incredible to watch the process. It's obviously most people like true crime because of the action, the bloodshed, the gore, the drama. But I like the admin. I like the paperwork that needs to be filed. I like knowing the phone calls they need to make, the steps they need to take to get to the next phase in the investigation. Because you see how hard everybody works. And this definitely comes across here. So, spoilers from now. The first thing that really shocked me in this, there were several things that kind of, made me kind of gasp almost. And I'm a seasoned true crime watcher. I'm a writer of crime fiction. I live and breathe this stuff. But the first thing that really shook me was when they played the audio clip of Kane yelling and shouting. And I can't repeat what he said on YouTube, but he was yelling at the top of his voice. Now, I have a kind of noise anxiety. I hate loud noises and I hate shouting. And it genuinely made me quiver. I can't even imagine how Lucy felt. It must have just been an absolutely horrific environment to be in, to be the neighbours of. We know that the police were called to this household several times, but because none of the reports were about violence or abuse towards the children, you can't really escalate it any further with regards to social services unless you have a very valid reason. I don't think anybody was at fault here from a professional capacity. There are similar cases where social services have been involved with similar cases, and the children have still unfortunately passed on. This is not one of those cases. So that was kind of the first thing that really shook me. The second thing, it was pretty, I was going to say pretty basic from that point until towards the end of the second episode. But what I mean by that is everything unfolded the way I expected. They went to arrest him again. He kicked off, and it made me laugh. I shouldn't have laughed. When he kept yelling at the police officers, "I beg your effing pardon." It just, the "I beg your pardon" is a very polite thing to say, but putting in the F word in the middle of it just amused me so much. I started to get very annoyed at Lucy when she was just refusing to cooperate with the police, refusing to let him be taken away. And obviously, on the one hand, yes, she loves him, and there's this whole thing that victims of domestic abuse will support their partner and stand by them. But when your child has been murdered by that person, and you know they're probably responsible for this, you have to put your own feelings aside and become the mother you need to be. And obviously, I was worried that they were going to treat her completely as a victim throughout this. So I was really relieved when at the end it was revealed that she was charged with neglect, because that's exactly what it is. I feel really sorry for her older children who will have some kind of comprehension. At least with this 11-week-old baby, as horrible as it is to say, he wouldn't have really understood what was going on. Whereas if this had happened to one of the older children, I believe the oldest child was 7, mentally and emotionally it would have been a lot more scarring rather than just physically. So it's horrible as it is to say, it's a good thing for the child's suffering that he was only 11 weeks and not really aware of what was going on. But yes, I was really frustrated that they were going to treat her as completely a victim. I'm really pleased with their attitudes towards her and how they progressed. They gave her a chance. They treated her as a victim who needed time to be, almost comforted and encouraged to talk. And eventually, when she just refused and was in denial, you have to say, well, hang on, you're a mother neglecting your child. You don't put your own problems first when you're a mother of 4 very young children. You just don't. And I'm really, really thrilled with the outcome of that. And I really like the way they portrayed that in the episode. From a personal, emotional perspective, I wish they'd told us sooner. But from a dramatic perspective, if you like, it worked very well that they kind of kept that verdict until right at the last minute. I got really annoyed as well when she turned up. I think it was the day after Kane had just been arrested. And she turned up in a face full of makeup, eyebrows drawn on, immaculate, nails perfect. She's supposed to be a grieving mother. Her 11-week-old baby has just died, supposedly murdered. And she's been sitting at the makeup table painting her face on. And some may argue that that's a coping mechanism, putting on a mask. But no, there's a difference between putting on a mask and, getting dressed up. There's a big difference. And I got really frustrated at that because she didn't really ever show any signs of grief after the initial shock wore off. And I just thought, are you collecting these children? Do you actually care about them? Deep down, I expect she did care about Teddie. But at the same time, it didn't come across that way. It was hard to have any sympathy for her. The person I felt the most sorry for, but not after the fact, is the young child. I believe it was the 7-year-old who was, I'm welling up now just thinking of this little child, who was being interviewed and who revealed to the police that Kane had physically hurt them, had thrown them, had yelled and shouted and punched the mirror. I'm not 100% sure if that voice of the child was the child's voice or the voice of an actor, because they obviously didn't show the child, but I don't think they said it was an actor's voice. But the emotion in that child's voice was very real, and regardless of which way it was. And I'm really glad that child has had a chance to have their say and is probably now in a much safer environment. I hope that's the case. A little bit emotional. The case for all of the children who've had to go through this absolutely horrific living situation. The last thing that really annoyed me is that how dare he try and kill himself in front of the van of a civilian who's got nothing to do with him. How dare he? There are many people, and I'm talking from personal experience, who get to the point where they just can't go on anymore. And if they think that suicide's the only way out, I don't think it's selfish. I know what those emotions are like personally. But to put somebody else's life at risk by doing it, I think, is the most selfish thing ever. And I stand by that. I genuinely believe that. And for him to think, well, I'm going to kill myself to get out of this, I completely understand. He's gone through, even though it's his fault, I don't believe he meant to murder anybody. His emotions must be at the all-time low. But there are other ways of killing yourself that don't involve risking the lives of people on a motorway as well. How dare he? What that van driver must have went through that day. And imagine if he had succeeded in killing himself and taking his own life. That van driver would have carried the guilt of that death with him for the rest of his life. How dare he try and bring that onto another person? Having said all of that, I'm genuinely surprised by the verdict. Obviously, Cain was convicted of murder of 11-week-old Teddie, but where was the evidence? We had a lot of evidence to say that he was violent, that they had a very, very volatile relationship, but while it's very likely that Cain was the guilty one, there is nothing to suggest it wasn't Lucy. For all we know, Lucy could have had the baby in her arms. Cain could have lunged at her. Maybe Lucy, I don't know, threw the baby out of the way from Cain's harm and he smashed into a wall. This is obviously horrible to talk about, horrible to think about. But there's nothing specific from this show to suggest that Cain was the person who inflicted those injuries. Can they say beyond reasonable doubt that it was him? It's hard. I mean, they must have done because the verdict's been passed. But Lucy was just as argumentative. He was the violent one, but she clearly reacted. Oh my goodness, my favourite thing I almost forgot is when the police went into their house and they were both like, no, we haven't been fighting. There's been no physical fights here. And Lucy was like, there's not a mark on me. And Cain says to the officer, if anything, the marks are on me. I just thought, well, you've just admitted that there was a physical altercation. You've just admitted that by saying that. I just thought, what an idiot. You've got no idea how this works, how stupid you are. So I found that amusing and definitely something that worked against him. The only time I ever felt sorry for him is when he was told that the child wasn't his. I genuinely felt sorry for him because I don't think he meant to harm the child. I think he has serious anger issues, and if it was him who inflicted the injuries, as I said, I believe it would have been, but I still don't believe that there was enough evidence to say that it was definitely him and not her. But that did move me quite emotionally, and I was, it's the only time I kind of felt a little bit sorry for him. The only time. It's an amazing two-parter. Absolutely fantastic in terms of the storytelling, giving baby Teddie's name some, just immortalizing this infant's name in this two-part documentary. It's done exquisitely. It's a joy to watch for the right reasons in terms of justice, but it's very emotional and, as I said, probably the most emotional and difficult to watch of all of the 24 hours in police custody so far. Very well edited. The narrative style is very good. The use of body cam footage, interviews with neighbours, audio, interviews with professionals, watching them work. It's absolutely fantastic. I hope you've seen it, otherwise I've just spoiled every aspect of it for you by this point. I did give a spoiler warning, but if you haven't, do watch it. Make sure you're right in the right frame of mind for it. But yeah, as a piece of television, it's amazing. As a slice of reality, it's absolutely disgusting, and one of the biggest emotional roller coasters I've ever experienced.